Part 60. The Return of the National Goddess. Author, Yun Suya. Chapter 591. Chapter 591. She won't live for more than a few days. Xiao Yanhong opened her eyes wide and was shocked. She stared at Xia Ying, her whole body trembling. As for Xia Menjian, your daughter, you can do whatever you want with her, we don't care. Xia Ying said, and she and Yu Lingfeng were about to leave. After walking a few steps, Xia Ying suddenly turned around and looked at Xiao Yanhong, who was standing there blankly, and said, as a friendly reminder, you can't repay the loan shark, so you'd better start running away now. You. Xiao Yanhong turned pale with anger. Without the money, it would be equivalent to killing her. If she couldn't repay the loan shark, she wouldn't be able to live for more than a few days. So, Xiao Yanhong chased after Xia Ying and Yu Lingfeng, trying to get them to give her a sum of money, at least to let her pay back the loan shark. I beg you, please don't be so heartless, okay? Those people really know people. If I don't pay the money, they will kill me. And Menjian is innocent, you can't see her die. Don't save me. Xiao Yanhong grabbed Xia Ying's arm and said, no matter what, Menjian is your sister, how can you be so cruel to her? Xia Ying broke away from Xiao Yanhong's entanglement and said with a straight face, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have a sister. My mother only gave birth to one child, me. I don't have any brothers or sisters. Please don't be sentimental. After Xia Ying finished speaking, she and Yu Lingfeng walked away together. Xiao Yanhong slumped on the spot alone, looking at everything around her with empty eyes. Failing to repay the loan shark would be equivalent to killing her. On the way, Yu Lingfeng, who had been silent, spoke up, when did you get that phone number? Oh, Zihu. Xia Ying said, when Zihu helped me check Xiao Yanhong's address, I asked him to check Xiao Yanhong's recent call records for me. Xiao Yanhong has always been addicted to gambling. She often called her from this number, so I knew it was a loan shark. Dead. When you put the knife to her neck, I thought you were going to really kill her. Killing her will make your hands dirty, Xia Ying said with disgust on her face, but if she can't pay the loan shark now, those people will never let her go. Xiao Yanhong won't live for more than a few days. It's a pretty good method to kill someone with a borrowed knife. And you don't have to do it yourself. Xia Ying continued, I didn't seem to see Xia Menjian just now, and I don't know if she was separated from Xiao Yanhong. After all, people like Xiao Yanhong have never understood what maternal love is. She has been using Xia Menjian to get money from the Xia family. Yuan Shui will know. Xia Menjian is more of a money-making tool for Xiao Yanhong than a child. In Xiao Yanhong's cold-blooded world, she is the only one. Xia Menjian was deeply influenced by her mother, and maybe she will follow the same path as Xiao Yanhong in the future. Yu Lingfeng said lightly. At this time, Yu Lingfeng suddenly raised his eyebrows, paused, turned slightly sideways, and said coldly, who? Xia Ying stopped, looked behind her, and asked Yu Lingfeng, what's wrong? Yu Lingfeng kept staring at a corner, and Xia Ying looked at Yu Lingfeng's eyes. After a while, two teenagers walked out of the corner silently, their heads hanging down, as if they had made a mistake and were afraid of being punished. Xia Ying frowned, Chu Shenxiu and 11 Ju. End of this chapter. The Return of the National Goddess. Author, Yun Suya. Chapter 592. Chapter 592, A good man never mentions his cowardice. 11 Ju met Yu Lingfeng's gaze and became frightened for a second. He weakly raised his little paw and complained, Master, it was Chu Shenxiu who pulled me here. I didn't follow him secretly. After hearing this, Chu Shenxiu raised his eyebrows and glanced sideways at 11 Ju, a coward who betrayed his teammates in a second. Can this guy have more backbone? He just asked him if he wanted to come with him, and didn't force him to come. Why is all the blame now being pushed on him? Besides, if a man dares to take action, can we learn from him? Big Turtle Dove, have you bullied 11 Jew again? Xia Ying said quietly. Chu Sensio shook his head like a rattle, raised 4 fingers and said, "No, I sent 4, I didn't bully him." "And why do you keep following me secretly?" Xia Ying frowned, a little unhappy. Chu Sensio saw that Xia Ying seemed unhappy and got angry with him. Hence, Chu Sensio immediately puffed up his chest, pointed at 11 Jew beside him and said, "It's none of my business. It was 11 Jew who said he wanted to follow Yu Lingfeng, so I came with him." J:. Forget it, don't worry about it anymore, the matter has been taken care of, let's go play. Xia Ying stretched herself comfortably, winked at everyone, and said, "Going to play, aren't you going home?" Chu Sensio asked. "Can't you give my parents some time alone?" Xia Ying said angrily, "I am a person who has just been released from the furnace of the college entrance examination, so aren't you going to take me to play?" Chu Sensio nodded with joy, moved closer to Xia Ying, and said, Okay, cousin Xia Ying, where do you want to go?" "Anything is fine, I will accept anyone who comes today." Xia Ying said happily, "Anyway, if you have time, you can play whatever you want." 11 Jew followed Yu Lingfeng weakly, poked Yu Lingfeng's back, and asked in a low voice, "Master, can I come with you?" Yu Lingfeng responded lightly, "Yes." Zihu immediately grinned, Hey, he hasn't played with his master for a long time. "Then let's go to the amusement park to play." "Can. An ocean park? Good. Haunted house." Xia Ying was startled, then looked at Chu Sensio, looked Chu Sensio up and down, and said mockingly, "Are you sure? I remember when I was a kid, someone went to a haunted house and was so scared that he wet his pants." Chu Sensio's face darkened after hearing this. "If you don't mention that a good man was a coward back then, can we skip this memory? How many years ago was that?" "Okay." Xia Ying suddenly became interested, "Then let's go to the legendary most terrifying haunted house in the imperial capital. The god of death is coming. What do you think? Do you dare to go? What's there to be afraid of?" Chu Sensio puffed out his chest arrogantly, "As if I am a man, who should I be afraid of?" Xia Ying was amused by his appearance. She wanted to know how many seconds Chu Sensio could last. Zihu was very puzzled when he heard this, then he raised his head and asked Yu Lingfeng, "Master, what is a haunted house?" "It's a terrible place." "How terrible?" The light in 11 Jew's eyes immediately dimmed, and he suddenly felt timid. Yu Lingfeng thought for a while, "It's not that scary, it's just a group of people pretending to be ghosts to scare people." "So it's all pretending?" 11 Jew had never been to a haunted house before, so he suddenly felt inexplicably excited. "Thanks to the little cutie Sakura young master and who are I crying for their rewards. Today, if the monthly ticket reaches 200, I will, just update 10 chapters. Please give me monthly tickets, please tweet, 3. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Return of the National Goddess. Author, Yuen Suya. Chapter 593. Chapter 593 Suemo. Death Comes is known as the most terrifying haunted house in the imperial capital. Generally, those who are brave and curious will go there to practice their courage. Xia Yingzi had never been there, but she had heard others say it was scary, so Xia Ying always thought that she must experience it once after finishing the college entrance examination. Chu Sensio also went to the haunted house in S country when he was a child. There was never a time when he was so frightened that he screamed and came out early, so it left a dark history. This time, Chu Sensio decided to avenge his shame. He must walk through the entire haunted house. When Xia Ying and the others arrived at the gate of the haunted house, they were really shocked by the people here. Xia Ying saw a lot of students from Guangyang, who probably came to seek excitement after the college entrance examination. "Hey, Chu Sensio." At this time, a voice suddenly stopped behind Chu Sensio. Chu Sensio was talking to Xia Ying at this time. After hearing the voice, he looked back and his smiling face suddenly dropped. Xia Ying also looked towards Chu Sensio's line of sight, and saw a young man about 1.76 meters tall, wearing a simple black t-shirt and jeans, with a baseball cap on his head and a lollipop in the corner of his mouth. Walking towards Chu Sensio. The young man has a delicate and fair complexion, and under the high bridge of his nose is a pair of lightly pursed, thin lips. The young man has a pair of charming peach blossom eyes that seem to be smiling but not smiling. In the blink of an eye, they can give people endless reverie. The young man walked up to Chu Sensio, but his eyes were attracted by Xia Ying beside Chu Sensio. "Hey, Chu Sensio, is this your girlfriend? She's pretty." The young man glanced at Xia Ying up and down, and there was something in his pupils that Xia Ying couldn't quite understand. Chu Sensio rolled his eyes, and then gave the boy next to him a fist, hitting the boy's arm. "Don't talk nonsense, this is my cousin, the legendary musical genius girl Xia Ying." The young man looked at Xia Ying's eyebrows and smiled wantonly. "Oh, that's it? Forgive me for being ignorant. Well, I don't blame you after all, you are not from China, and you have just arrived in China not long ago." Chu Sensio said. "Xia Ying." Su Mo murmured the name, then smiled slightly and said, "Isn't it the name you often say in my ears?" Chu Sensio blushed, looked at Xia Ying's questioning eyes, smiled, and scratched the back of his head. Chu Sensio was chatting with the young man, and Xia Ying asked at the side, "Who is this?" Chu Sensio quickly began to introduce him. "This is one of the 3 major leaders of our Imperial University. He is also your future senior. His name is Su Mo." Xia Ying looked at this young man carefully. Su Mo's facial features were very delicate, like those of a Korean idol. His peach blossom eyes were a plus, and his smile could win people's hearts. "Hello, talented music girl." Su Mo smiled faintly and stretched out his hand towards Xia Ying. Xia Ying lowered her eyes and looked at those slender, white, girl-like hands, and her eyes lit up. "This Su Mo is really good looking. He looks good from the inside out. It's easy to be attracted to him." While Xia Ying and Su Mo were chatting, Su Mo suddenly felt a cold breath gradually coming towards him. Su Mo turned around and looked at the man behind him who had an indifferent expression and didn't say a word the whole time. Although he didn't say a word, he was standing there and his eyes unintentionally glanced at you, which would make you shiver. End of this chapter. The Return of the National Goddess. Author, Yuan Suya. Chapter 594. Chapter 594. I suddenly felt a little scared. This man had a natural sense of oppression and fatal danger. Su Mo couldn't help but squint his eyes when he saw him. As if he thought of something, he looked at him for a while and then said, "So, this talented person is he Xia Ying's boyfriend?" Chu Sensio followed Su Mo's gaze and looked at Yu Lingfeng. Although he was very reluctant to admit it, it was the truth. Chu Sensio nodded perfunctorily, and then quickly changed the topic. "Well, what? Su Mo, why did you come to the haunted house? And you came alone?" Su Mo didn't seem to intend to change the topic, but stared at Xia Ying and sighed, "That's such a pity. I originally thought that our Imperial University would have a new goddess, but I didn't expect that she would become famous so soon. There is a master. Hey, you brat, don't try to take advantage of my cousin Xia Ying. Although I have graduated, I will supervise her at any time." Seeing Su Mo say this, Chu Sensio quickly became vigilant. Yu Lingfeng remained silent and looked at Su Mo calmly. Suemo heard Chu Sensio's words and immediately smiled. I said, "Do you want to be so powerful?" I just sighed. Suemo said, patted Chu Sensio on the shoulder, and then started chatting with Chu Sensio. "Why did you come to the haunted house alone?" Chu Sensio asked. "Hey, don't mention it. Those cowards made an appointment to come together, but they all changed their minds at the last minute, and I was the only one left. I thought that since they are all here, I came over to see the most legendary thing in your imperial capital. A scary haunted house." Suemo said. Suemo is from M country and came to Imperial University as an exchange student. Meeting Chu Sensio was also a quite dramatic experience. Suemo is now Chu Sensio's best friend at Imperial University. Suemo was one level lower than Chu Sensio. When Xia Ying was a freshman, Suemo was a junior. Yu Lingfeng. Xia Ying called Yu Lingfeng's name. Yu Lingfeng had been standing there thinking about something. Xia Ying's call woke him up from his thoughts. Yu Lingfeng looked sideways at Xia Ying. "What's wrong? What are you thinking? They're all in." Xia Ying said so and took Yu Lingfeng's hand and led him towards the direction of the haunted house. "Master, Sakura, I suddenly feel a little scared." When he first arrived at the door, Zihu looked at the shouts coming from inside, as well as the people who were helped out by other staff who were so frightened that their faces turned pale and their legs were weak. He swallowed silently and started a little scared. Although Yu Lingfeng told him that the so-called ghosts and ghosts were all pretended by people, 11 Ju was still a little scared subconsciously. So he tugged at Yu Lingfeng and Xia Ying's clothes anxiously. Xia Ying turned back to look at 11 Ju. Before 11 Ju even entered, he was already so scared that his legs were weak. Xia Ying patted 11 Ju on the head and said to him, 11 Ju, don't put pressure on yourself, you are a great robot. Zihu was still very timid and felt that his eyelids were starting to sweat from fear. Zihu had watched those horror movies before, and he was frightened every time. He never finished watching them completely. This time, 11 Ju's hair trembled when he thought that those horror movie scenes were about to happen to him. Yu Lingfeng looked at 11 Ju's appearance and said quietly, "Are you sure you are afraid?" End of this chapter. The Return of the National Goddess. Author, Yuan Suya. Chapter 595. Chapter 595 Forced Mode. 11 Ju met Yu Lingfeng's cold gaze and was suddenly excited. His heart, which was still beating in panic, immediately calmed down at this moment. No, 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 I'm not afraid anymore. 11 Ju immediately shook his head, straightened his chest, and said to Yu Lingfeng firmly. Yu Lingfeng glanced at 11 Ju lightly, said nothing, and just walked forward. Xia Ying looked stunned. What is going on? Xia Ying approached 11 Ju and asked him in a low voice, 11 Ju, are you really not afraid anymore? 11 Ju licked his lower lip, looked at Xia Ying aggrievedly and said, I want to be afraid, but the master won't let me be afraid, so now I can only turn on the forced mode and can't let myself be afraid. Xia Ying frowned after hearing this, patted 11 Ju's little head, and looked at him with some distress. Xia Ying walked up to Yu Lingfeng, raised her head and asked Yu Lingfeng, why did you do that to 11 Ju? Yu Lingfeng was startled and looked at Xia Ying, how is it? Zihu said he wanted to be afraid, but if you didn't let him be afraid, he could only activate the forced mode. I think he feels so wronged. He seems to be very afraid of you. Yu Lingfeng frowned slightly and explained, although Zihu is a super simulated robot, he is not perfect yet. If he loses control of his emotions, it will be serious. Xia Ying heard this attribute of 11 Ju for the first time and couldn't help but become curious, what will happen? Go crazy. Yu Lingfeng still has lingering fears when he thinks of the previous incident. Ordinary people will collapse when their emotions reach the extreme, but for 11 Ju, emotional collapse is a very serious matter, which will seriously damage the system, and in serious cases, will burn out his brain system. After the brain system is burned out, it takes a lot of effort to repair it. After walking into the haunted house, the eerie light inside and the highly contagious scary music around made people tense up. I'm afraid that if I don't pay attention, a ghost will pop up around me and scare me. 11 Zhu followed Yu Lingfeng closely throughout the whole process. When he felt scared, he stretched out his hand and grabbed Yu Lingfeng's sleeve. Had I known it earlier, I shouldn't have been curious to experience it. Although Xia Ying was not as scared as the screaming of the girls around her, she was actually still very scared in her heart. She just thought that Chu Shenxia was in front of her, and she laughed at Chu Shenxia when she came in. Now Chu Shenxia didn't react at all, so she definitely couldn't show fear. Xia Ying looked at Yu Lingfeng aside. Yu Lingfeng looked calm and composed. Even when a group of zombies came over, Yu Lingfeng did not frown. Xia Ying is convinced by this psychological quality. One of Xia Ying's little goo insects came out to look at it curiously, and then immediately retracted its body. Xia Ying's bracelet suddenly rang. Xia Ying thought it was because the little bugs were scared, so she smiled, then reached out and touched the little bell and said, "Don't be afraid, this is all fake." Before Xia Ying finished speaking, a corpse suddenly stood up next to him, picked up the sword next to him, and ran towards Xia Ying fiercely. Careful dash. At this time, Su Mo, with quick eyes and quick hands, grabbed Xia Ying's arm, then spun around and gave the corpse a kick. Xia Ying was suddenly pulled by Su Mo. She lost her balance and staggered. Seeing this, Su Mo immediately stretched out his arm to catch Xia Ying. However, when he was about to make contact with Xia Ying, Su Mo jumped away. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Return of the National Goddess. Author, Yuan Suya. Chapter 596. Chapter 596. Go and take off his clothes. Yu Lingfeng reached out and pulled Xia Ying into his arms, then looked at Su Mo indifferently and said, "Thank you." Su Mo was stunned for a long time, staring at Yu Lingfeng for a long time, and reflected on how Yu Lingfeng ran over to catch Xia Ying in such a short period of time. As for the person who tried to hurt Xia Ying just now, he seemed to be seriously injured after being kicked by Su Mo. Yu Lingfeng glanced at Su Mo meaningfully, and then walked towards the man. At this time, some other tourists had not yet realized what had happened. But they all quickened their pace and tried to leave this place. Are all haunted houses now so simulated? The person acting as a corpse actually hurts tourists? Who sent you here? Yu Lingfeng looked down at the man with a bloodthirsty look in his eyes, as if he was about to bend down and crush him to death in the next second. It's just part of the show. The man explained while covering his chest. Yu Lingfeng didn't buy it. He stared at the position where Su Mo had just kicked him and said, "If you can withstand Su Mo's kick just now without suffering any damage, you must be no ordinary person. A professional killer? So, who ordered you?" The man's eyes were flustered for a moment, but then he calmed down and still claimed that he was just a corpse, and that everything just happened was part of a performance. People who want to die always talk so much. The man saw the light in Yu Lingfeng's eyes dimming, like the look in the eyes of an angry beast before attacking the enemy. Yu Lingfeng moved his fingers and then said, "If you have time to talk nonsense, you should consider how to die." Yu Lingfeng. Xia Ying suddenly stopped Yu Lingfeng and walked towards him. The man swallowed silently when he saw Xia Ying. It seems that the boss's guess is correct, these people around Xia Ying are not simple. Hey, Yu Lingfeng, stop talking nonsense with him. This guy dares to hurt my cousin Xia Ying. It's obvious that he is impatient with life. Chu Shenxia came up to him while cursing, looked at the man, and then said to Yu Lingfeng, "Beat him to death." Go and take off his clothes. Yu Lingfeng suddenly said. Chu Shenxiu was stunned after hearing this. Ah! What the hell? Take off his clothes? What do you want to do to him? Yu Lingfeng glanced at Chu Shenxiu coldly. Forget it, this person is unreliable. Yu Lingfeng looked back at 11 Ju. When 11 Ju saw Yu Lingfeng's eyes, he knew that Yu Lingfeng wanted him to do something. So 11 Ju knocked off the bright red prosthetic hand that was still swinging automatically and walked towards Yu Lingfeng. Master, what do you want me to do? See if there are any marks on him. Yu Lingfeng said to 11 Ju. Good. 11 Ju agreed immediately, and then everyone saw 11 Ju's pupils begin to change from black to red, scanning the man's body like an X-ray. The man felt something was wrong and wanted to run away. Unexpectedly, they were surrounded by them from all directions. He still remembered Sumo's kick just now, so he didn't dare to run in Sumo's direction. After thinking about it, he gritted his teeth and prepared to break through Chu Shenxiu's defense line. However, just after he had practiced a few moves with Chu Shen, Yu Lingfeng suddenly moved his finger slightly, and an extremely small needle flew towards the man. Then, the man's body froze, can't move a muscle. End of this chapter. The Return of the National Goddess. Author, Yuan Suya. Chapter 597. Chapter 597 Shadow Hunter. When Chu Shenxiu saw this, he was stunned for a moment. After he realized what happened, he started to make faces and show off his power at the man. Hey, 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 you're here to hit me, hit me. Master, he has a human-shaped black shadow mark on his body. 11 Ju said to Yu Lingfeng. Yu Lingfeng's eyes darkened, it's indeed them. Who? Xia Ying looked at Yu Lingfeng. Shadow Hunters, Yu Lingfeng said, the most powerful international killer organization in legend. Aren't Shadow Hunters specialized in serving as bodyguards for rich people? Xia Ying asked. She remembered that Rong Ci told her about Shadow Hunters. Ever since he was a child, there have been many Shadow Hunters around Jun Chenai, who have been secretly protecting him. Those are the lowest Shadow Hunters, a group of killers who have been eliminated. That's why they are reduced to bodyguards. Shadow Hunters who can truly perform tasks as killers will have a Shadow Hunter mark that symbolizes the organization. That is a piece of the shape of a human figure. Yu Lingfeng explained. Damn, who wants to kill my cousin Sakura? Chu Shenxiu was unhappy after hearing this. I don't care if he is a hunter or a shadow. As long as he dares to come again, I, Chu Shenxiu, will be the first to let them go. Yu Lingfeng ignored Chu Shenxiu and asked 11 Ju, where is his mark? At the ankle. Ankle. Yu Lingfeng raised his eyebrows, and then said to Chu Shenxiu, when you fought with him just now, you clearly had the upper hand. And he is just the lowest level of Shadow Hunters. If you encounter a mark on his waist, and the advanced Shadow Hunters on the chest, you can't even move a finger on them. Chu Shenxiu frowned when he heard what Yu Lingfeng said so miraculously, and said in disbelief, are they as evil as you said? Are they really that powerful? Very powerful. Being called a very powerful person by Yu Lingfeng must be something extraordinary. Chu Shenxiu immediately shut up and stopped talking nonsense. But who did my cousin Sakura offend? Why did the Shadow Hunters come to hunt her down? Yu Lingfeng didn't think about this clearly. Shadow Hunters are usually under the command of others. Those who can use Shadow Hunters are definitely not ordinary people. Chu Shenxiu rushed to the person who was immobilized and asked, hey, let me tell you, who sent you here? Who wants to harm my cousin Xiaoying? What are you talking about? The man closed his mouth tightly and stared at Chu Shenxiu, but did not speak. It's useless, he won't say it. Yu Lingfeng continued, this is their code. After the mission fails, they would rather commit suicide than betray the organization. After hearing this, Xia Ying stared at the man with her eyes widened. He is just a low-level shadow hunter. I guess he just came here to have a look. He is definitely not the one who carried out the mission. Suemo suddenly spoke from the side and said. Yu Lingfeng looked at Suemo and nodded, you are right. Since the other party wants to kill people, he should understand that it is impossible for this kind of thing to hurt Xia Ying in the slightest. He came here just to try our abilities. Your analysis is so clear and logical. What should we do now? It seems that cousin Xiaoying will be in a very dangerous situation in the future, Chu Shenxiu said. After cousin Xiaoying went to college, we were not with her, and the other party was. It's very possible to take action. End of this chapter. The Return of the National Goddess. Author, Yuan Suya. Chapter 598. Chapter 598. I can protect Xia Ying. I have a poisonous insect. Xia Ying shook the goo insect bracelet on her hand and said. At this time, the little goo insects also showed their faces in a very dignified way, with their firm eyes seeming to say that they can protect their master. As soon as Xia Ying finished speaking, Sumo's eyes fell on Xia Ying's goo insect bracelet. Suemo was very curious about Xia Ying's goo insect bracelet. He had heard of such things as goo insects, but he always thought that it exists in very remote and superstitious minority areas. Suemo also knew that the Miao border region was very famous for the art of voodoo, but even there were very few people who could actually raise good voodoos. Raising voodoo insects is a very dangerous thing, not to mention that with the advancement and development of science nowadays, even in remote areas, these things are no longer done, because it really has no big effect and is very tiring and troublesome. It feels like a thankless job. Can you show me your goo worm? Suemo came closer to Xia Ying, staring straight at Xia Ying's goo insect bracelet. It's just that the little goo bugs don't seem to have any intention of meeting strangers. They keep hiding in their little bells and just don't come out. Xia Ying smiled lightly, they are a little afraid of strangers. Suemo frowned, is your goo so spiritual? Xia Ying nodded, yes, they are all very smart little bugs. Suemo felt as if he had seen a new world. He opened his eyes wide and looked at Xia Ying's little bugs with disbelief. Goo worms can protect you even if they don't see you, Yu Lingfeng interrupted Xia Ying, and then said, of course I don't deny their ability, but in the event of an emergency like the one just now, your goo worms will be able to protect you. It seems a little slow. When the little goo insects saw Yu Lingfeng talking about them like this, they immediately became unhappy. They stuck out their little heads and stared at Yu Lingfeng, and began to protest against what Yu Lingfeng said about them being useless. Suemo on the side saw the scene and couldn't help but widen his eyes and said in surprise, oh my god, these bugs are so smart. What kind of goo insect is it? It can think independently, like a mammal. This simply overturned Sumo's usual understanding and cognition of goo insects. Your little bugs, what do they usually eat? They eat everything, Xia Ying continued, they are easy to feed. They can find food on their own without me having to worry about them. Suemo opened his mouth wide in surprise again, how did you get these goo insects? Hey, I'm talking about Suemo. Chu Shenxiu on the side couldn't listen anymore, and hurriedly came over to interrupt, we are discussing serious topics now, why do you only know these few bugs? The question is one after another, why do you think you are 100,000? Suemo stopped asking after hearing this, and explained, I just think it's amazing. As for the things you said, don't worry about it at all. I can protect Xia Ying for you. Suemo patted his chest and assured. Chu Shenxiu said disapprovingly, you? Are you sure? Although I don't deny that your kung fu is indeed good, but compared with those so-called shadow hunters, are you sure you can do it? Chu Shenxiu felt that since Yu Lingfeng just said that he couldn't defeat the lowest shadow hunter, Suemo shouldn't be much better. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Return of the National Goddess. Author, Yun Suya. Chapter 599. Chapter 599 Troubled Times. Suemo was not annoyed after hearing Chu Shenxiu's question. Instead, he curled his lips and said calmly, Chu Shenxiu, it seems you don't know me well enough. Do you want to compete with me? Chu Shenxiu sneered disdainfully and said to Suemo, are you kidding me? I'm a master with a black belt in Taekwondo. Oh, so what? Suemo obviously didn't take Chu Shenxiu seriously. Hey, you little brat, do you have to compete with me and be convinced that you lose before you admit defeat? After hearing this, Suemo smiled disdainfully, it's impossible to lose to you. Chu Shenxiu's fight was completely stirred up by Suemo. Yu Lingfeng glanced at the two of them and said, you don't have to compete, Chu Shenxiu, you can't beat him. Yu Lingfeng looked at Suemo thoughtfully and said to Chu Shenxiu. Chu Shenxiu suddenly became unhappy when he saw that Yu Lingfeng was actually standing on Sumo's side. Hey, let me tell you, Yu Lingfeng, you brat, do you still admit that I am your cousin? The elbows can be turned outwards. This is it. Just discussing the matter. Yu Lingfeng looked at Suemo, and then said, as soon as you stepped out, I knew you were not simple. Where did you learn martial arts? Suemo raised the corners of his lips slightly, smiled proudly, and said, I'm sorry. Yu Lingfeng didn't say anything because he had already guessed that Suemo wouldn't say it easily. Hey, Suemo, you little brat, are you still playing mysteries? Chu Shenxiu said angrily. You don't have to worry about Xia Ying's affairs, I will protect her. Yu Lingfeng said to Suemo and Chu Shenxiu. I said, Yu Lingfeng, I understand your feelings, but if you don't stay with cousin Xia Ying, how can you protect her? Yu Lingfeng frowned slightly, looked at Chu Shenxiu and said, when did my abilities become so doubtful? Chu Shenxiu opened his mouth, obviously full of complaints, but looking at Yu Lingfeng's ice-hardened eyes, he couldn't utter even a single word. Okay, he is awesome, he admits defeat. It's been a really troubled time recently, with one wave coming after another. Chu Shenxiu sighed. Chu Shenxiu's words awakened Yu Lingfeng. Since June Chennai I was inexplicably named and murdered, now shadow hunters are out to harm Xia Ying. The connection between the two must not be that simple. Yu Lingfeng still remembers the fire in the love kindergarten. June Chennai and Xia Ying were both there at that time. Yu Lingfeng still hasn't figured out the last case. Now that so many years have passed, someone suddenly appears and wants to target Xia Ying and June Chennai. Yu Lingfeng vaguely felt that there might be some connection between them. By the way, Yu Lingfeng, what are you going to do with this person? Chu Shenxiu pointed at the shadow hunter who was still motionless like a puppet and said. Yu Lingfeng raised his eyes to look at the man, and then walked towards him. When the man saw Yu Lingfeng coming, he gritted his teeth and said, if you want to kill or behead him, it's up to you. I won't say a word. Of course I know, Yu Lingfeng said lightly, I just came here to get my needle back. Yu Lingfeng said, taking action and taking away the needle. Immediately, the man realized that he could move, and when no one was paying attention, he immediately ran away. Suemo and Chu Shenxiu wanted to chase them, but Yu Lingfeng stopped them. Wait a minute, stop chasing them. Chu Shenxiu was puzzled, didn't you just say you wanted to kill him or something, why did you let him go so easily now? End of this chapter. The Return of the National Goddess. Author, Yun Suya. Chapter 600. Chapter 600, Walking Dog Food Making Machine. Yu Lingfeng sterilized his needle slowly, and then carefully took it back. Facing the confused looks from all around, Yu Lingfeng explained calmly, so what if I kill you? I've just been killed. While he was not paying attention, a positioning chip was placed next to him, so that he would be able to know their location. As soon as Yu Lingfeng finished speaking, Chu Shenxiu's starry eyes of admiration immediately flashed. Wow, Yu Lingfeng, you are so smart. But what if he finds out halfway? Su Mo questioned. No, Yu Lingfeng's chip is implanted in his body and will not be suspected. Xia Ying came forward to explain. Yu Lingfeng nodded approvingly. Su Mo looked very surprised. Who are these people in Chu Shenxiu's family? A rare goo insect with the ability to think, one with such superb and powerful abilities, is simply terrifying. Even if the shadow hunters wanted to harm them, it would be extremely difficult. No wonder the shadow hunters had to send a low-level guy over to spy on them before deciding on a plan of action. Otherwise, coming here hastily would be just asking for death. Damn it, Yu Lingfeng, do you still have such a thing? Chu Shenxiu was dumbfounded when he heard this, then he thought about it, and as if he thought of something, he turned to look at Xia Ying, and then said, So, cousin Xia Ying, you also have Yu Lingfeng's positioning chip in your body. No wonder Yu Lingfeng just said that he could protect Xia Ying without their help. With such a thing, wouldn't Yu Lingfeng be able to know where Xia Ying is anytime and anywhere? Big Turtle Dove, you have a rare moment of enlightenment today. Xia Ying said with a smile. No, Yu Lingfeng interrupted him, the chip in Xia Ying's body is different. Yu Lingfeng looked at Xia Ying meaningfully, and Xia Ying immediately understood what Yu Lingfeng meant. The chip that Yu Lingfeng placed on the shadow hunter is similar to a tracking chip. When you want to know his location, just sense it and you will know. Xia Ying's one naturally has this effect, but when Xia Ying needs Yu Lingfeng, she can just call his name and Yu Lingfeng can sense it. The one on Xia Ying's body is much more complicated, and it was specially designed by Yu Lingfeng for her. Yo, what kind of chip are you talking about? Are you just showing off your affection? Chu Shenxiu said sourly from the side. Yu Lingfeng and Xia Ying are simply walking dog food making machines. Chu Shenxiu simply turned his back on them and stopped looking at them. He just walked forward with his head held high, thinking about finishing his haunted house. However, Chu Shenxiu had just walked a few steps when suddenly a ghost with eyes hanging on his face, a sunken nose, covered in blood and a tongue half a meter long jumped out from the corner in front. Ah dash! Chu Shenxiu screamed, then subconsciously ran away. Xia Ying laughed so hard behind Chu Shenxiu that her stomach hurt. She knew that Chu Shenxiu still couldn't finish the haunted house. There is always a lot of defense in a haunted house, and people like Chu Shenxiu who are not very defensive can be easily frightened. Su Mo could not suppress his laughter and followed Chu Shenxiu, fearing that he would get lost. As a result, Chu Shenxiu had just ran to a place, thinking he was safe, and then a ghost hand appeared behind him and put it on his shoulder. Ah dash! End of this chapter.